Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. Why you should not give up on silver. Let's explore. As of the recording of this video, silver has been hit hard by recent events, which are in many ways unprecedented, maybe not even so much as the black swan that everybody's been talking about, but by the reaction to it in the stock market and in the financial markets around the world. But aside from that, silver has been stagnant for a while. And many people have been discouraged to see that the price is not making a move in the direction that they think they should and that it deserves. And it's understandable the reaction why people would get frustrated in terms of the price of silver. When I started really paying attention to the prices, silver was making a move in an upwards direction. But I really didn't pay that close of attention, didn't really analyze exactly how silver has moved in the marketplace over the last 50 or even 100 years. And there's many different ways to interpret that data aside from that. I've heard talk from many different analysts that go from one extreme to the other. I've heard that silver is going to save the day and that it should be at 1-to-1 with gold and that it will get there one day. And I've also heard that silver is trash and it's not worth anything and that it's basically a losing proposition. But I believe that's really somewhere in the middle. And by the way, I'm not a middle of the road kind of guy. I have very strong viewpoints on many different things. But I also like to be flexible in my viewpoint as I learn and take in more information. And that is why I feel strongly why we should not give up on silver. But in my view, we need to be realistic about silver. Because I believe that if you look at the facts and you look at the historical context of what silver has done for millennia, then really should give you a sense of comfort even in times like this when the price gets pummeled by the markets. So let's talk a little bit. Basically, in general terms, I don't want to get too deep into analysis, but I do want to refer to essentially data that goes back, adjusted for inflation, as to what silver is doing now compared to over 100 years ago. But we're also going to look at the times in between, too, because you can't just pick two dates, because you can pick any two dates and make silver be like the best thing that has ever happened to anyone around the world. Or you can pick two dates and say that silver is the worst investment or worst strategy you could ever take, and it is a losing proposition no matter how you pin it. You can take any two dates and make data adjust to exactly how you want to perceive it. So I believe the idea is to be realistic and look at it through the average of a long term. And I'm using data from a recession adjusted, inflation adjusted, going through recessions and looking at the recessions and how they impact the price of silver. Will we head into another recession? I don't know. I don't think most of us would have predicted that we would go into a recession based off of what has been happening as of late with a black swan as sorts. And I'm not mentioning the actual name because it could be any black swan or anything. But if we were going to head into a recession, what happens during recessions? Well, typically right before or at the beginning of, even into the middle of, silver tends to go down in price instead of go up in price. There are obviously some exceptions to the rule, but those exceptions are typically during many recessions. But most of the major recessions that have occurred, silver has taken a dive. But if you take into account those lows and also take into account other factors that come into play, how has silver performed over the long run? Well, if you go back, if I'm looking at a chart from over 100 years ago, 105 years ago to be exact, Well, silver is performing slightly better than it did 100 years ago, adjusted for inflation. And keep in mind that during that time, gold was fixed, fixed. You just after the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, gold kind of had a fixed price, so the ratio really can't be compared to gold at that time. But essentially, silver is performing from the very beginning to today. As far as the charts go back here, 1915, from macro trends, silver is performing better. Now, there are obviously different times in between where silver has performed much worse. But most of that time where it's performed much worse was before 1960. In fact, adjusted for inflation, by October 1960, silver was around $8 an ounce. That's adjusted for inflation. What happened? Well, we saw the two big spikes in 1980 where silver was well over $100 an ounce adjusted for inflation. And in 2011, adjusted for inflation, it was at $55 or almost $56 an ounce. And again, these are adjusted for inflation prices here. But so what happened during the other times where it was lower? Well, the other low period of time before 1960, where it was below $10 an ounce, was during the 90s and early up coming into 2001, and probably up until about 2003 or so, or 2004 is when we started to really see the prices kind of move up into an area being adjusted for inflation. And so we saw silver perform at or above inflation. It was right around 2005, 2006, 2007 when it really started to spike upwards. And then we had the Great Recession. And right before that, it did spike up to around $20 an ounce, adjusted for inflation. And then it went right back down to under that period, which is where it is now, under $15, $11.62. And since its rise in 2011, the pullbacks have been at a point where we have seen it bottom out essentially at around $15 on average. You know, there's been times where it's gotten below 15 and went to 14. I think at one point it went to like 13, high 13s. But essentially, $15 has been that solid resistance for the most part. And that is kind of what I'm seeing. Now, I'm not an analyst as far as, taking and being able to average out all of the different prices, taking out the outliers, which would be 1980 and 2011, but also even some of those really low lows where it got, well below adjusted for inflation to a point where it's, $6 or what have you. And so I don't know what that average would be, but essentially based off of inflation adjusted data, and by the way, that is calculated different ways in different areas, so you have to take into account and keep in mind that the Federal Reserve, by its very design, wants to adjust inflation or wants to target inflation at 2% each year. And silver, I believe, in the long run, will keep in line with inflation. In other words, it will hold its value. And there's going to be times where it performs much worse than inflation, like October 2001, when it was $6.15. But in recent history, since the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, we've not seen a recession. We're the longest period of time before a recession has hit. And so we're now seeing the prices start to go down. Could they go down even more? Yes, they could, especially once we know there's a recession coming. And we are, I believe, possibly could get close to it, especially after what I'm hearing in the news as of late and how the markets are reacting. No one will really know. We'll find out there's 3 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. But once we do hit that, then we may see the silver price actually decrease even more. And then what happens after a recession? The price of silver goes up. Now, it may take a little bit of time after the recession ends before it goes up, but if you look at the charts and look at the data, that has happened every single time it has gone up. Now, again, keeping in mind and understanding the gold to silver ratio, I believe in this period of time from 2010 onward, I believe silver is being seen more and more as a commodity than it is as a safe haven because of its versatility and use as a industrialized metal, as being used in technology and in the biomedical field. And so that is going to have a play on prices that could mean that the gold to silver ratio could widen. Because keep in mind, gold is being seen even more so as a safe haven these days. And in fact, but it does the same thing. It'll tend to go down along with silver right before a recession as well. But it's not hit nearly as hard as silver is. And I believe that's happening even less so, which is why the gold to silver ratio may continue to widen, and we may have a new norm for the gold to silver ratio from here on out. Just as we're seeing kind of a new norm for silver in its real and inflation adjusted price moving forward, that holding the line there, I believe we may see a new norm for the gold to silver ratio as well. But that does not mean that we should lose heart because this metal has been used as money for thousands of years. I believe it is still money. Even though it is not utilized in our coins and currency these days, I believe it holds the properties of money. It's just dormant money. And I believe that is part of what is protecting that price point. It's going to get hit. It's going to go through. It's going to tumble. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. And as you may remember, recently I posted a video as to what happened if silver went to $50 an ounce again. And I believe we should temper our view and not get so excited or being unreasonable in the approach as we analyze how we view this precious metal. And yes, I do believe it is still a precious metal. It's just in a world of hurt right now at this very moment, as the time I'm recording this video, in comparison to where many of us think it should be. But keep in mind, we had a very extensive period of time where it was performing much better than the rate of inflation. I'm talking about the times, especially if we take off the inflation-adjusted dollars, when it was trading at $20, $30 an ounce for quite a while. And so, those days are over for now. Will they return? I think they very well may. It may be quite some time before we get there again. But don't lose heart. And don't give up on silver. Now, I will also say, while you should not give up on silver, you may find yourself by taking inventory of your stocks of silver that you may have enough. I believe it's wise to diversify into gold as well. Gold is the ultimate safe haven, I believe, but doesn't necessarily mean we should give up on silver, and it doesn't necessarily mean we should sell our silver, but it also doesn't mean we necessarily have to go out and buy a bunch of it either, even at these low prices, because it could go lower. But there also may be a good buying opportunity, but it may not be the buying opportunity that others may profess it to be now. So keep that in mind too. Silver, I want to say that again, silver may not have the buying opportunity that others profess it to be. Be smart about your purchases out there. So just some food for thought. Like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for watching and post your thoughts below. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.